Hello, all. It has been a few weeks. I think some of the recent videos were recorded in the past and released in the future. I'm in Doha now, in a country I only recently discovered wasn't pronounced Qatar. Enjoying my time here. It's very, very hot. It's like Dubai, but a little bit cheaper. And what I wanted to do today is more of a casual video, no sponsor, no editing, just me sitting here and talking. And I want to do it about something that personally I have a lot of interest in and I spend a lot of time thinking about. And that's because this is a channel about money, about finance and economics and entrepreneurship. And I think just like, say, the role of nature versus nurture in behavioral science and the way a lot of people kind of discount those factors, so much ultimately a vast majority of, for most people, your financial future and opportunities and constraints are put upon you by the macroeconomic environment that you live in. That's just an unfortunate truth. And that applies on every level from locally up to countries and the world as a whole. Whereas technology does its thing over time. And if you were born as a peasant in the Middle Ages, that's going to, impact your ability to create value, whatever is the money equivalent of the day. And obviously, you as an individual, as someone in that environment, there's going to be a very wide spectrum of performance there, and you're going to drive and create different amounts of that value versus someone else. But again, environment matters so much. And we don't talk about that on this channel. We talk about stocks and investing and starting your own business and approaches there, when really paying attention to the macroeconomic environment. And if you want to take action as an individual, positioning yourself to be able to react, whether that's in your investment portfolio, whether it's the kind of career you take, or whether it's, hey, where do I want to live in the world? Where do I want to position myself in a geographic sense? And there's one point about the US economy that I feel people miss. And whether you love it or whether you hate it, the US does have the most important economy in the world. That applies when you think about the federal bank and how everyone looks to the feds and the Fed chair, all the central banks of the world for the signal that everyone else goes and follows. In terms of technological output and progress, the US is still fairly dominant, right? Depends when you think about China in terms of, say, research output and tech on a per industry basis. But generally, everyone still looks to the US because the US is where people put their money and that incremental unit of capital. I'm not talking for the most part about individuals, say in foreign countries, and that still applies. But if you think about the hedge funds, the pension funds, the governments, the uber wealthy individuals of the world, there is no investing, there is no place to invest like the United States. So you mesh all of those factors together, and the US, if you're anywhere in the world, is going to disproportionately affect as a foreign country, or if you are an individual in the US, of course, your financial standing. So then where are we at now? And it's a really interesting question, I think, because you have a very vocal maximalist side and perspective to things, and you have a minimalist or a maximally pessimistic group of people as well. You have the Ray Dalio logical kind of arguments of the world that say, hey, we're mathematically in a debt spiral, we're following into the trap of every other empire before us, and vice versa. You have people who say that AI is causing this labor revolution and it's going to bring about UBI in a few years. And you have these two cases. And then you have the way that, say, politicians or business leaders act, which is somewhat in the middle. It's, okay, let's prepare ourselves for a era of tighter labor, right? Especially in tech, people are hiring a lot less, one of automation. And let's also, in terms of, say, CapEx and where our just, again, incremental investment goes, for a world of not just automation, but especially AI as well. So you have business leaders and politicians where it's business as normal, just kind of more risk. We have to adjust to some little things. We have the Ray Dalios that say, hey, the world's going to end for the US in a few years, and it is written in stone, just like, again, every empire preceding the United States. And you have the uber maximalists of America is going to lead the world into the future, and money's, if it even matters, the US is going to dominate across the board. And you have the Zihans of the world who say, hey, China, which is the only serious competitor to the US currently, and for decades at least, right, is going to fall apart in the next few years. There's population issues. They're propping up their economy with just, state funds. And so the only real competitor, so to speak, is the US. And that gives the US, especially with her currency status and so on, this really dominant position, not just now, but for the next 10, 20, 100 plus years until someone like, say, India gets their act together. So the point I want to make, and the reason I titled this video like so, is that if you bring all of this together, you have this extremely wide, this distributed set of perspectives about the macroeconomic environment of the US. And they're all well-founded. They all have a precedent. And what that ties into is how, as economists, we go and make predictions or decisions about the future. There's kind of two big ways to go about that. One is theory, and the second is data. And what data says is, well, the future is going to behave in a way that is in accordance to the past, right? There are patterns in the past that repeat themselves. There are triggers and there are booby traps and mines in the minefield. And you can, if you have enough data about the past and you've seen XYZ happen before, make a very, very solid prediction about the future. And that's what a lot of economic modeling is, where you have like the famous Monte Carlo simulations and all types of these problems where you take these parameters as given using an empirical approach. So using data that's out there for hopefully similar situations. And you use that to, in a very literal sense, try and predict the future. And then you make decisions based off of that. So that's generally what you aim for. And then you have theory. And theory says, okay, if we do the math, this is going to happen, right? If we do the math about, say, GDP and interest rates and growth and competitors, then we don't need the past. We don't need data or precedents. Instead, on paper, we'll figure it out and the world will probably turn out like this. And the most solid predictions happen when those two worlds mesh, when you have the theory that backs up what actually happened and vice versa, and then you can make extremely accurate predictions about the future. But where are we currently? And that leads me back to, well, you have this very distributed set of extremely sound arguments about the macroeconomic, financial, especially future of the US. And the argument I'll make is we don't have any precedent for the current position of the United States, right? You can compare the US to prior empires, but in terms of the just economies of scale and the nature of the compounding laws that we see at work with things like technology generally, as well as specifically artificial intelligence and all these factors, especially with the reserve currency of the world and apart from China, the real kind of just scale and technological and capital domination that we see in a lot of ways. As a global entity, that is fairly unique. There are comparables, but that's just the start, right? And then you throw in things like artificial intelligence. That is this black horse, and we have no idea what's going to happen there. We don't have any model to predict artificial intelligence. And you have experts making fantastic arguments about why you have this maximalist AI case. Same with the pessimistic, the maximally negative AI case, and also people in the middle. And those all rely on some kind of precedent or insight or logic. And so you have that, right? You have, again, the status of the US, you have AI, you have the debt load, and you have the political environment, right? You have all these kind of black horse variables, whereas you can try and use the past to model the future of the US in different ways. But you can do that successfully and produce an equally distributed range of predictions. So maybe the best case here, or the best type of predictions that we can make about the macroeconomic financial market that we are all most dependent upon as individuals is crowd logic. And the idea that if we take all of these ideas and we put them together, we'll arrive at some kind of middle state that's going to work out. Maybe that's the most reasonable way to think about it. But the case I'm going to make, and again, the reason I titled this video like so, is we don't really know what's going to happen. We don't have a model to predict and to accurately describe the financial future of the United States of America. And a second thought there is that maybe that as a data point infers that you should hedge. Because if you have, say, just a static risk preference and there's much more volatility, you can't predict a very high or a very low outcome, you're going to want to hedge more. And that is a perfectly reasonable thing to do. An argument I've also made prior is that if you have some kind of business or some way to invest capital in not literally yourself, but something that you do that produces distinct returns that are as separate as you can get from the greater macroeconomic environment, maybe just completely de-risk out of everything except that and some risk-free rate of return. So something like bonds or money market funds. And whatever the approach you take, whether you hedge and you de-risk, or whether you just say, hey, either it doesn't work out for the world and we're all screwed, or I'm going to make a bunch of money and put my money where my mouth is there. I urge you to take any individual opinion that you hear about the US and to contextualize it in that grander bubble or that idea of we don't have a model for this. We cannot accurately predict this future because we haven't been here before. That doesn't mean the experts are wrong. Maybe that means in the aggregate, in the the average, I think the jelly bean experiment, they're correct. But if you take out any single opinion, I'm not saying the logic or the reasoning is wrong, but the guess that they take has to be considered in was one of the sum. And I hope that is somewhat reassuring, because if you hear a lot of those downside cases, then it's jobs are going to exist in 3 years and AI is going to take over and China's going to invade the US by next week and so on and so forth. And I don't think that's the case. And while there are very good arguments for all those things happening, again, there are also very good arguments against all of those things happening. So hopefully it works out in the middle, but generally we'll find out as we go. Maybe that's the fun of the financial markets. Anyway, those are my ramblings for today. I don't normally make videos like this, and I'm in front of this very nice wall. But if you do enjoy the style, let me know as well. That said, I wish you a pleasant day and one free of financial worry, or as much as you can get in today's world. Cheers.